As we start, viewers are highly encouraged to use their own judgment. The information below is only meant to be useful and fun. This is the exact evidence that was given in federal court during the Sean Diddy Combs trial, as reported by Inner City Press. What came next shocked everyone in the courtroom. Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson, a global hero, former wrestling champion, and blockbuster star, walked into court with a face that not many people had ever seen. It was broken, open, and scared. He wasn't there to sell a movie. He had something to say. When he went on the stand, he talked about a horrible set of initiations that he said happened behind the scenes of his rise to fame. Not what he went through shocked everyone. It was Sean Diddy Combs who planned it. The Rock started crying as he talked about Diddy's strange control over early Hollywood ties. He talked about a weird ritual in which people had to eat raw monkey brains, be locked in a basement, and be humiliated to show their loyalty. The judges couldn't say a word about what Dwayne said under oath. No one was ready for it. There was no news release, press alert, or whispering in the halls. After hearing from stars like Monique, Denzel Washington, and Jamie Foxx, the courtroom was already shook. But when Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson walked in through the side door, the room didn't just stop moving. It broke. Gone was the confident, happy figure that millions of people knew and looked up to. On the red carpet or in the wrestling ring, this wasn't the man who clapped back. The man who walked in now looked haunted, tired, and empty. His signature furrowed brow was not a sign of bravado, but of mental pain. He didn't have any papers or notes with him. All he had was the weight of something he had never said out loud. Even Diddy, who was sitting next to his defense team, turned around and seemed to get stiff. It looked like his lawyers were taken off guard as they whispered quickly. During this time, the prosecutors looked at each other. They had been keeping this name secret for a reason. This moment was going to change everything. When Dwayne went to the stand, he didn't want to sit down. And then he looked at the judge while putting both hands on the bars. The judge said, "May I say something before we start?" First he looked at the crowd, then the judge, and finally Diddy. "I don't want to be here, but I have to be. I've lived with something that's eaten away at me for almost 20 years. And the truth is, I'm still scared, but I'm more scared of what happens if I stay silent." The court didn't move. After being sworn in, Dwayne finally sat down. His voice was low and gravelly, not because he was trying to sound dramatic, but because he was very upset. "You all know, me as The Rock, the guy who never breaks, but I'm about to break now, and I need everyone in this room to understand what I'm about to say isn't just about shock, it's about how he got away with it for so long." His lips trembled as he spoke. "I was one of them. One of the ones who thought playing along meant survival. I played along, and I paid a price no one ever saw." And then, the room, the trial, and the whole cultural conversation changed when Dwayne Johnson started to talk about a strange and embarrassing Hollywood introduction that would be in every news story for years to come. The judge leaned in as Dwayne Johnson talked about his first meetings with Diddy. "From wrestling to movies, I was making the switch in 2001. The Scorpion King had just come out, and I was hungry, driven, but innocent." He said, "Diddy seemed like a guardian angel, a connector, and someone who could open every door in Hollywood. When he said, 'Let's talk off the record,' I didn't ask why. I thought it was just business." Dwayne talked about how Diddy asked him to industry nights, which were private parties held at Diddy's mansions in Los Angeles and Miami. It wasn't a wild party at first. It was just chill, champagne, handshakes, producers, studio workers, and casting directors. The mood changed over time, but everyone still said Diddy's the guy. There was less of a networking vibe and more of a test vibe. Dwayne said he'd ask, "Are you ready for greatness? Would you die for it?" I laughed, but he didn't move his face. Then the gifts came. Diddy would ask Dwayne to party at strange times. He was once told to get to a house in Bear at 2:13 a.m. He said that's when important choices are made. Johnson was the only person there for more than an hour until a group of quiet guests in black suits showed up. They were not allowed to talk. It looked like a cult waiting for its boss. It is said that when Diddy walked in, he turned down the lights and played music through speakers that were hidden. As Diddy's voice played over and over, it asked, "Are you worthy? Are you ready? Would you eat what I feed you?" Dwayne told the court, "I thought it was art, some twisted, creative, motivational thing." I told myself over and over, it's just show business. These guys are weird. But deep down, I knew something was wrong. Then the first test came up. Diddy asked Dwayne to meet him by himself outside of Los Angeles, but he didn't say where. My PR person told me that this meeting might be the one that changes my life. So I said yes. Dwayne held his eyes on the judges. He was right. It did change everything, but not the way I thought it would. As soon as Dwayne Johnson said monkey brains, the mood in the courtroom changed from shocked to terrified. He didn't say anything for a long time. I've never told my wife, my friends, or even my therapist this part out loud, he said. He talked about being taken to a private home on the outskirts of Los Angeles while naked. The driver didn't answer when I asked him where we were. He only turned up the music. 2 men led him into a dark room with candles and black cloth stretched over the walls when they got there. The only light came from red lanterns on the floor. 5 men in suits sat around a low table and were all quiet. At the head of the table, Diddy was laughing and carrying a crystal goblet. Dwayne said it looked like oil because it was full of something. The tray then came. A man in a white robe took it out. They didn't say anything about it. They just put it in front of me and took it out. It was a steel plate with still steaming pieces of raw monkey brain on it. No flavor, just a wet, shaking tissue. Dwayne looked down, and his voice broke. Diddy said, "Everyone who made it ate, and everyone who didn't disappeared." He then told the men to look at me and said, "Let him feel the pressure." He tried to leave, but the door was locked. I asked if it was a joke or a tradition. No one laughed with me when I tried to laugh. He was then given a spoon by Diddy. It was at this point that Dwayne started to cry on the stand. He said, "Hollywood is not about talent, it's about obedience." I was scared, felt bad about myself, and was by myself. He put the spoon to his mouth while his hands were shaking, but I remember the sound, people laughing, chewing, and then there was quiet. I don't remember the taste. They watched him finish the routine for 30 minutes while he sat at that table. Diddy is said to have stood up and clapped when it was over. "Welcome to level 2, he said. Dwayne looked at the judges one more time. When I left, I felt like a part of me had died. It wasn't because of what I ate, but what I gave up to eat it. No one spoke in court because the man was telling more than just a story of abuse. He was also showing how far people will go to stay quiet if it means getting what they want. As Dwayne Johnson talked about what happened after the scary routine, his voice got stronger. He talked about what he now knew to be psychological conditioning that was done to him not only to make him feel bad about himself, but also to take away his freedom and turn him into someone who needs acceptance from those in charge. They started to treat me differently, not better, because they thought I was one of them now. Still, they had to make sure I would stay quiet and do what they said. He remembered being asked to what he thought was a business retreat in the middle of the desert, but when he got there, he didn't see any agents or studio execs. Instead, he saw a few other entertainers, some who were just starting out and some who were already well known. They all seemed uncomfortable. Dwayne said they were put in rooms apart from each other that didn't have windows. People's phones were taken and music played non-stop for hours. Only random amounts of food were given to them, and they were told to memorize strange scripts, chant affirmations about giving up control and letting the greater power of success take over, and only speak when spoken to. I first thought it was performance training or some kind of strange class, but then it hit me. It was about giving up control. They wanted us to think that fear was loyalty and pain was progress. He took a break. Nobody told me to speak up because I was afraid that if I did, they would think I was crazy. Besides me, other people were also seeing it. When we passed each other in the hall, we'd look at each other as if we were stuck in the same horror that isn't said. Dwayne said that he had trouble sleeping, felt nervous, and had doubts about who he was after this event. It wasn't just acting anymore. He felt like he was being shaped by hands behind the stage, like he was being trained or turned into a product. Just quiet, chaos, and control would have been enough for them. No chains. After that, Dwayne Johnson talked about what he called the machine behind the curtain. His account said that after what he called the obedience trials, he was suddenly flooded with chances, but they came with conditions. I started getting offers out of nowhere, films I wasn't even supposed to be considered for. People told me, "Did he vouch for you?" I didn't ask why. I was just grateful, he said. One meeting with the head of a big company stood out. As for his skills, they only said, "We hear you're good at the game. That's all that matters." When Dwayne asked for changes or questioned certain parts of his contract, he was often told that if he didn't stay on good terms with certain people, he might not have any options left. "I realized these weren't offers, they were assignments," he stated. Diddy had a lot of power in areas other than music. He wasn't just a songwriter. As an unspoken rule, if he wanted you to be blacklisted, it would happen. He had investments, relationships, stakes in companies, and favors due. Dwayne said he once turned down an invitation to a party after work. The next week, his agent called to tell him that a big studio had suddenly pulled his name from a project. That's when I knew silence wasn't just expected, it was mandatory. Even the people around him were cautious. My managers, my lawyers, they all knew where the lines were. Nobody wanted to speak his name unless it was with praise. He began to feel like a puppet, and not just because of the companies that were pulling on its strings. There were also secret alliances that held him together with fear, favors, and lies. You learn very quickly that the people who control access in Hollywood don't do it out in the open. It's done through whispers, favors, and debts. Dwayne Johnson talked about the time he saw too much and decided he could no longer be a partee of the group he had been forced to join. His voice was heavy as he spoke. He thought back to a private event that took place at a fancy home in the Hollywood Hills. He was told it was a private screening and night for networking in the business. When he got there, but he knew it wasn't that right away. The house was barely lit, and there were guards at each door. At the door, phones were seized, and people were given masks to protect their privacy. It didn't feel like a party as much as it did like someone else's introduction. He felt uncomfortable as he walked around the outside of the event. What he saw made him feel bad. A famous younger actor was crying in the hallway, which Dwayne said, "I saw people I admired, actors, musicians, even directors, behaving in ways that didn't look like celebration. They looked lost, like they were trying to prove something or hide something." He was shaking and holding a drink. I asked him if he was okay, and he said, "They told me this is what it takes." Dwayne left early that night. That was the night he said the glamour broke, and I could see the machines below. He didn't sleep when he got home, not because of what he saw, but because he knew that the safety he had been given had come at a price. They didn't invite me because they liked me. They did it because I was useful and had shown I could be quiet. His voice broke as he said, "But seeing that young man made me remember who I was before all this, before the fear and the shame." He turned to the judge and said, "That was the night I promised myself I would never lie about what I saw if anyone ever asked me." He kept that promise today as he stood in court. The courtroom was painfully still while Dwayne Johnson was on the stand, not because he was famous, but because he told the truth. Everyone was looking at him. He took a deep breath and looked ahead. He said that people ask us why we don't say anything, why actors, musicians, athletes, people with platforms don't speak up when we see things that aren't right. He sighed and looked down. He told her, "I'll tell you why. Because it's terrifying." He said that he thought the best way to stay alive in Hollywood in the beginning was to keep moving, smile, act, and not question those in charge. You are told not to make people angry or call people names. "If I speak, I lose everything I built, you think?" he said. He didn't keep quiet out of guilt. He was afraid of getting hurt, being shunned, or being called tough or unreliable. It's not always threats. Sometimes it's just seeing someone go away, jobs disappear, calls stop, and contracts end. He brought up other actors who disappeared from the press after leaving the close group. Rather than being crazy or unstable, he said they were just tired. Tired of acting and tired of being owned. Dwayne talked about what it costs to keep secrets. He said it made him feel scared, alone, and like he didn't know who to trust. You don't want to be a part of something you didn't sign up for, but leaving breaks things that can't be fixed by anyone else. He paused again, and his voice cracked a little. Worst of all, you start to wonder if you were involved just by being alive. As the judge looked at him, Dwayne Johnson stood taller and seemed more sure of himself than before. He pointed to Cassie Ventura's lawyers and said, "Seeing her come forward changed everything. It reminded me that silence protects the wrong people." He didn't talk like The Rock, but like a man whose life had changed him. Some people believe that once you've made it, No one can hurt you because you're successful. He said, "The truth is, the higher you climb, the harder it is to speak." He built his reputation on being strong, resilient, and positive, but he often felt helpless behind the scenes. "I couldn't talk about what I saw or felt because it didn't fit the picture." He said he didn't say anything for years because he thought it would cost too much to do so. But in the last few years, especially as more survivors came forward in the business, he changed how he felt about his silence. He said it stopped being self-preservation and began to feel like treason. He remembered a young fan telling him, "You're the guy who never quits." That comment stuck with him because he had quit on his younger self, his values, and people who were still stuck in power structures they didn't want. Dwayne wiped a tear off his eye. "I'm not testifying to cancel someone. I'm here because I've been silent long enough. And I don't want anyone who looks up to me to think silence is strength," he stated. To be honest, this wasn't about who was to blame. "And I want people in power to know that we see you now. You're not invisible anymore." Dwayne Johnson turned to face Sean Diddy Combs directly, which made the courtroom tense. "I've been carrying this for too long," he began. "I want to say this to you, Monto Man?" He didn't raise his voice or make wild gestures, but his words were more powerful because they were delivered with calm confidence. His eyes were fixed on Diddy as he shook his head. "You made me believe I had to give up my integrity just to be allowed in the room. And I believed it. That wasn't power," he said. "It was fear dressed up as influence." He talked about the other people who had met Diddy and hadn't had the courage to speak out, who were still suffering in quiet. "I'm speaking for them now, for the people who were told they had no choice, who were told that dignity and dreams couldn't live in the same place." He stopped talking. As he left the stand, Dwayne's last words echoed through the quiet courtroom. "It ends here with the truth." He left the courtroom not as a victim or a headline, but as someone who had taken back control of his story and was no longer afraid or silent. Everyone who was watching knew that something had changed in Hollywood. A quiet rumble went through the crowd as the bailiff led Dwayne Johnson away from the witness stand. But Dwayne stopped before crossing the open courtroom doors. He didn't look at Diddy or talk to the press. He turned around one last time to face the room. He said with a firm voice, "I want to leave one more thing on record. This story, my story, isn't just about me. It's not about fame, scandals, or headlines. It's about the people who never get to sit in this chair, the ones who didn't make it long enough to speak, the ones who are still stuck behind the curtain, afraid that no one will believe them." He took a slight turn and spoke to the culture that allowed the silence for so long, not just the jury and judge. And he talked about how success can lead to abuse. For decades, Hollywood has been built on a lie, on the myth that power justified, of a price we can't question, but that myth is now bust. Instead of anger or getting back at someone, speak the truth. He took a deep breath. "When I didn't say anything, I was afraid I'd lose everything. But the truth is, I never had anything. Without myself." A small group of people in one part of the courtroom began to give their support. Lawyers looked around, not sure if they should step in. "He did it anyway, Judge." Dwayne gave another nod to anyone watching who was still not sure if it was safe to speak up. "Now is the time to say something. The silence is over. We're no longer scared." He then left the hall. There were no cameras around, and no agents were in a hurry to make up a story. There was only one man who finally spoke up, and for the first time in a long time, the system didn't know how to shut him up.